Welcome to Spirit in Action. My name is Mark Helpsmeet, and each week we bring you visits and conversations with people doing healing work for this world, hearing what they're doing and what inspires them and supports them in doing it. Welcome to Spirit in Action. Today for Spirit in Action, we welcome back Pamela Boyce Sims. Back in 2017, we visited with her about evolutionary cultural design. In 2019, the topic was the African Diaspora Plant Medicine Project. Today, we're catching up on the direction of her work in the intervening years, how she was called to serve during COVID and since, when she's been assembling a project around several different health concerns, including prostate cancer and brain issues. A big part of her work has been to bring together diverse resources to study and handle these health challenges. Pamela has a wide range of skills, experiences, and aptitudes, including those of an African-American woman who has also lived in Senegal, who is a certified neurolinguistics master practitioner, Karma Kaju meditation instructor, and transition trainer for Transition US. We have production help today from Andrew Jansen, so let's let Pamela Boyce Sims explain at least some of the details as we speak to her via Zoom in southeastern Pennsylvania. Pamela, it's great to have you back for Spirit in Action.
It's wonderful to be here.
It's been a long 6 years. The world has changed so much. How did you survive COVID?
With a lot of distribution of lots of herbs to lots of people in a mask. It was actually quite a stimulating period. We did parking lot distributions of medicinal herbs in distressed communities. It was very, very rewarding. And we couldn't keep the respiratory herbs on the shelf. People were just taking everything we could possibly find and having excellent outcomes and mitigating COVID. It was a horrendous period, but a very productive period for herb education and people's health that I was dealing with anyway.
I did hear, of course, about alternative treatments and such for COVID that people were doing, but I don't think I heard anything about the herbs that we should have been paying attention to. What kind of herbs are we talking about?
It's not so much curing, we never claim that, curing COVID. But basically the herbs we're talking about are things like mullein, elecampane, herbs that are tonifying the respiratory system, the lungs, and then for the upper respiratory system as well, we're flying off the shelf. We were distributing something called detox and respiratory protection, which is basically boosting your immune system at the same time as tonifying your lungs and preventing congestion if it's already started. So we stave off the effects of COVID or mitigate the effect of COVID if you're exposed to it. As herbalists, as clinical herbalists, we never claim to cure. That's a definite no-no. The establishment comes down on your head, even though for 5,000 years people have been doing just that, but shh, don't tell anybody.
Yes. I know where to find mullein around here. The others I'm not sure I know about. I believe in foraging. One of my big things each year is to harvest acorns for food. Right now, there's ramps growing in my backyard. I know where to find them. On and on, I know more and more. I haven't studied the medicinal side of it. How did you get into the medicinal side of this? I didn't think that you were nurse trained, or maybe you were.
Yeah, no. I'm a master practitioner of neurolinguistics, and I was doing counseling, psychotherapeutic counseling with people really early on, and realized that I wanted to offer people a stable foundation physiologically so that the conversations we were having about working with their own psychodynamics would be more fruitful. And I felt very uncomfortable sending someone to someone who could prescribe pharmaceuticals. So I began to study herbalism as one of the adjuncts or supplementary offerings that I could make to people that I was working with their own psychology. So that's what triggered my doing that, and studied herbalism with some of the greats in New Jersey and upstate New York and New England, and then went through clinical practice and was supervised by folks and integrated that into my counseling work. And then coming to Pennsylvania from New York, I then didn't have to send someone to the health food store or go find this tincture online or look for this tea. I actually put together a group of Quaker meetings and Buddhist monasteries and community organizations that grew and continue to grow medicinal herbs. So no longer did I even have to just stop at recommending, our network actually was producing the medicinal herbs too. So it's kind of like A to Z, soup to nuts.
Weren't you doing that near Woodstock originally? Were you doing the herbs up there and then?
Absolutely. That I started in New Jersey, and then when I moved to living in a monastery, Karma Triana Dharma Chakra Monastery in the mountains behind Woodstock, I was the environmental point person for the 17th Jalwang Karmapa, which is one of the Buddhist lineages there. And at that point, deep dive into environmental work and the herbalism that I had been commuting to upstate New York to learn it crystallized into environmental activism and environmental resilience building and networking to support that as well. So everything kind of came together in the monastery, just like 5 years later, it came together at Pendle Hill in the Quaker community. So there have been these junctures where everything I've been studying and working with and the clients that I've been working with came together and at the crossroads took off in a big way in another direction.
Were you at all influenced by Ewell Gibbons?
Oh, back in the day, the crunchy granola guy.
And you
Yes,
know he was Quaker, right?
I did know that. I did know that, but I haven't thought of Ewell Gibbons in a really long time. Yes, he was one of the way showers in the forefront, really before crunchy granola was even popular as crunchy granola thinking.
So you migrated back down south. A thing that people may not know about Pamela Boyce Sims is I guess probably now it's close to 40 years practice as Buddhist, that you took refuge along the way. Are you still refuged?
I'm definitely everything I do in the community, the spiritual community that I convene, the community supported enlightenment network, is completely with a cosmology and a framework for understanding subtle realms, the non-physical, which is completely a Buddhist worldview. I also came through theosophy and anthroposophy and then settled on Buddhism, and then Quakerism intersected when my last son entered Westtown School in Pennsylvania. I was looking for a spiritual tradition for him, and Buddhism only has a college level systematic education for young people. And he was at high school level when I was going into the monastery. So I deliberately looked for a Quaker boarding school so he'd have that contemplative aspect to his daily life. Settled on Westtown, which was my first pull to Pennsylvania. My son, and then I began running group for Quaker parents at Westtown School and getting more and more rooted myself in Quaker practice. And that's where, in the silence, Quaker practice melded with my Buddhist practice. So, but I'm still very definitely, my worldview is a Vajrayana Buddhist worldview. But my on the grounds work is with Quaker meetings.
Okay. Well, the reason I asked about refuge, when you took refuge, and at least one of your sons has as well, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, at one point you were going into refuge in a kind of physical way as well.
I spent 4 years in a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. It was a monastery I had been commuting from northern Jersey to upstate New York in those mountains for more than a decade before I actually just said, okay, householder period of my life is done. 3 kids in college, 1 going to high school, and that's why I kind of introduced Westtown into our lives and a Quaker practice for my son. And then I just devoted my life to service in a Buddhist monastery, which is where I began also working for the head of that lineage, the 17th Jalwang Karmapa, being his point person for the environment in all the United States meditation centers.
Just so our listeners know, if they haven't listened to my interviews with you from back in 2019 and 2017, you're African American. You have this connection to Africa, part of the diaspora that has so enriched the world. And so there's that piece also, a place where you've reached out and given particular connection and care to. I'm not sure if my words express how you feel like you've done, but I'm hoping that I'm conveying something. Maybe you can convey it better.
There's a thread. When I look at a lifetime, an embodiment, we call it a pre-birth contract, I can see the thread of the African diaspora that has wound through. This particular lifetime, from age 14 forward, when I became aware of the subtle realms that are not physical through the natural world of plants, my entire focus has been on spiritual development. Through that, I was married for 22 years to a Cameroonian who came to the United States, worked for Chase Manhattan Bank, and then we went and lived in Senegal in West Africa. He was setting up a regional bank for what was Chase Manhattan Bank at that time. So I lived in Senegal, West Africa for 5 years. So Africa has been physically part of my life. My children are part African American and part 100% Cameroonian, and had that choice to make when we came back from Senegal. But my whole life has been geared toward not transformation, we always say transmutation, constant peeling off layers of sediment that has to do with a very form-focused seeing of the world to connection with spiritual realms, subtle realms. And it's only later on that I said to myself, well, Pamela, you've been doing this for decades. You've been a good Buddhist, Quakerism intersected, but you've been born in a brown body. That is part of the pre-birth contract coming in for this lifetime. It's time to pay homage to the fact that there's a reason for being born in this body. And that's when, again, at that gathering in 2017, when I was one of the keynote speakers at the FGC gathering, that's when paying homage to the African diaspora became possible through this plant medicine work, where I was able to serve the most disadvantaged Black communities by distributing medicinal herbs free of charge and doing herb education to facilitate environmental resilience building to the most vulnerable populations. And then when the polarization happened in our country, it had been there brewing for a long time, but as it accelerated, then the connection was made between African American communities in the most southeastern part of Pennsylvania to Appalachian poor, impoverished Appalachian white communities in the central part of the state. So even as I'm paying homage to having been born in a brown body this particular lifetime, still there was a holistic approach. Let's make this connection so we see through healing and medicinal herbs all of the things that as humanity are up for evolution and transmutation. So the conversation began with medicinal herbs. But again, every time I move toward the thread of African diaspora, I'm continually pulled into a larger perspective. Yeah, I lived in Africa. I was married to an African, a Cameroonian. I made the decision to focus on distressed African American communities. But then the framework just always goes bigger. And the connection between the diaspora and other people who have had similar situations becomes equally as imperative. So that's kind of where we are now.
When you were in Senegal, were you located in Dakar or elsewhere?
We were right on La Corniche in Dakar.
That's really the only area of Senegal that I've explored at all. I spent a week or so there. And actually, my first arrival on the African continent when I went in Peace Corps, we had a day layover in Senegal. So I went out. Interestingly, I know you were a vegetarian, as am I. I became a vegetarian when in college. And of our group going to Togo, 12 of us, one of the persons in our group, we went marching around, see the markets in Dakar. One woman saw the animals hanging with the flies on them and everything in the marketplace. And she says, "No, I'm a vegetarian now." And there was one of the men who had been a vegetarian who became a meat eater just because I want to accept food whenever anyone offers it to me. I want to do that hospitality and welcoming. So Dakar, two people switched. One went towards vegetarianism, the other one away from it.
Fascinating. Seeing fresh animal carcasses there could definitely do it. Then you definitely don't want to look at the food system in the United States. You'd run screaming in the opposite direction.
When I talked to you back in 2019, we were talking about what was at that time called African Diaspora Plant Medicine Project. I'm kind of stunned. I didn't hear about this connection of Appalachia with the Black communities. It sounds like it's something that happened in the last 6 years since I talked to you.
Oh, yes. So much has happened in the last 6 years. Yes. As I mentioned, we began with the spiritual community supported enlightenment, and the Plant Medicine Project was born at that FGC gathering in 2017 in Niagara Falls. And a network of folks, Quakers, and then broadened out to Buddhists and people who were spiritual seekers generally held the space and continued to hold the space and the container for the boots on the ground work. And that was taken up by a whole bunch of Quaker meetings who said, yes, we want to do this social justice, environmental resilience building. We're gardeners, we're horticultural people, and we're definitely looking to do something that is physical, that will physically move the needle. So we had meetings in Ohio, we still do, Ohio, in Texas, upstate New York, throughout the state of Pennsylvania, pick up the baton. We had other communities in Maryland, and we still have other communities in Vermont, but those are Buddhist meditation centers and community centers. But these friends picked up the mantle, and to this date, from that gathering, continue to provide medicinal herbs that are, I am funded to, by philanthropies up until this point, we're at a big switching point at this time, by philanthropies that were spearheaded by another Quaker who was in Maryland who said, oh, I know a foundation that can run with this. So I was able to provide infrastructure for the Quaker meetings, everything needed to grow medicinal herbs. They provide the sweat equity. They have the land and they put in the work, but we'll do topsoil, soil amendments, raised beds, anything that they need to grow the herbs. And then they ship them for processing in southeastern Pennsylvania. And these meetings stay with us today. They're part of a sociocratic network of circles, sociocracy coming from Kees Boeke's Dutch next iteration out from Quaker process. So we have a sociocratic process that holds a series of circles, one of which are these Quaker growers that continue to work with us to date. It's been 8 years since that process. The Quaker meetings are the foundation of this because they provide the herbs that have been a substrate for conversations between people who have been receiving these herbs and herb education for a long time in the Black communities, underserved communities in southeastern Pennsylvania. And since I've spoken to you, we've moved out to the Appalachian communities to do a cross-cultural kind of thing, because these folks are folks that don't necessarily ever have any contact speaking with a Black person. The interface between the mountain communities that we currently work in, and I've been working in for about 3 years now, is usually crime scenes on the television or bad news about people of color. They may have waved to someone across the parking lot, but in terms of having an actual conversation with people of color, it simply does not happen. So what we did in the time since I've spoken to you is we used those medicinal herbs to begin conversations about healing, access or lack thereof, both in the Black communities and impoverished Appalachian communities, lack thereof to access to medical treatment that is of quality, access to physicians when they needed it, access to insurance. Like, what is that? Insurance is very, very underinsured or not insured. But again, people who have ancestral connections in Appalachia through originally Celtic and English and Irish traditions of plant medicine, and people who have brought this entire African, West African in particular, plant medicine tradition. Our conversations focus on healing through age-old traditions in plant medicine, coming face to face with the realities of what impoverished people face in terms of the deficit in the healthcare system now, so we don't have to talk about politics. We don't have to talk about all those things that would just make us run in the opposite direction. And the spiritual community, the community supported enlightenment network, gives us a set of tools where we can do work before I even walk into a room with someone who would never even let me in their space. I can communicate with them at levels that they're unaware of, so that they're opening their heart to me. I'm opening their heart to them. They don't know why, because logically, why would we let these brown-bodied people into our space? They have horns, given what certain news channels say about them. But our spiritual practice holds the space for those cross-cultural conversations. And that's one of the things that have been happening since we spoke last.
You mentioned some of the herbs that you were helping people sustain their health with during COVID. Are there other specific areas that you've been delving into in terms of these herbs? Herbalism is a vast area. It was the medicine long before anything like antibiotics were discovered, before sulfa drugs were discovered or anything like that. So are there particular areas you've been targeting? Because quite literally, there's many thousands of herbs you could be producing for all sorts of purposes.
Yes, we serve the most disadvantaged of disadvantaged, and we try to keep our finger on the pulse of what is happening in our society so that what we are doing in offering complementary alternative or complementary integrative medicine is what is needed in the moment. And after the focus on respiratory herbs and detox and immune boost herbs for the acute crescendo during the COVID pandemic, we started looking into the aftermath of what happened to the population generally, and more acutely for our distressed populations post-pandemic. And that was memory, brain function, and mental health. We had people that are dealing with intense loneliness, disconnectedness, anxiety, depression. We're also focused on an older population that is dealing with cognitive decline as well, coupled with the aftermath of COVID. So that was one area, and we can get into that at your leisure. And then we're also focused on prostate cancer, risk reduction, treatment management, which has to do with pain and anxiety and depression. Again, so there's an intersection between the general population, anxiety and depression, what's happening societally, as loneliness being an epidemic amongst Americans generally. When the prostate cancer diagnosis comes down the pike, what that does to men's sense of self, identity, depression, the who am I questions, intersects with the work we were doing generally with mental health. And then after risk recovery, treatment, diagnosis, treatment, and moving men through that process using complementary alternative medicine, how to get back on track and build a life that doesn't put you back into that comorbidity space with diabetes and nutrition problems and high blood pressure as a function of the life we're living. Those are two areas, and we put together a complementary alternative medicine, a CAM team, or complementary integrative medicine Kim team, that offers services. We have a number of different alternative, integrative healthcare modalities to men moving through this process. And now generally, we're at another one of those crossroads. We started with our distressed populations, the most vulnerable, and then we move it out and up and offer it to a larger population. So we're at that crossroads now with both the memory, brain function, mental health projects, and the prostate cancer risk reduction process.
I do want to go into prostate cancer discussion. First, I want to remind our listeners that I am speaking with Pamela Boyd Sims. It's the third time I've spoken to her, but it's been 6 years since, and I've missed the conversation. I've missed the depth and the clarity that always comes from speaking with Pamela. This is Spirit in Action, and we are a Northern Spirit Radio production on the web, northernspiritradio.org, where you'll find links to all of our guests. So if you go back to those interviews with Pamela from 2017, 2019, you can hear again the ground being broken, moving toward what we're talking about today. But you can find that for all of my guests of the last 20 years. It's now 20 years. Been doing both Spirit in Action and Song of the Soul. So please do check out those archives, those links. There's riches there. And as I was told by one of the people in the Pacifica Network who works with the affiliates, she says that almost all of my programs are what she calls evergreen. As opposed to the flash in the pan news that most people do, this is news that's worth visiting 10 years later, 20 years later. So I think you'll find that throughout the programming. So please come to the site, check out the different programs we've done, follow the links, post comments when you do. Give us suggestions where we're going. Pamela just contacted me a couple weeks ago and said, I have some more to share, and I was happy to invite her back. I'm always looking for people's feedback because two-way communication is the best kind. I certainly have a voice that works well enough, but without your voice, we're incomplete. So please do reach out to us that way. You can also support Northern Spirit Radio on our site. We do view our effort, and it's actually right there in the statement of the purpose for Northern Spirit Radio. Northern Spirit Radio promotes world healing by broadcasting inspirational and educational voices for peace and social justice using the language of story, music, and spirituality. So you see why you fit here perfectly, of course, Pamela. So please, with the donation, support us. We do not take money from corporations and we don't take money from the government. And that's a conscious decision because we want to serve your needs, not the strings attached that come with any of that other money. So please help us out if you can. We can't do it without you. Sustainability happens in community, not individually. Again, we're speaking with Pamela Boyce Sims. There's a couple sites that you can track Pamela and her work. And it's not just her work. This is, again, done in community. You can track it down via singularitybotanicals.net. Again, this is on northernspiritradio.org. singularitybotanicals.net. And the other one that you'll want to check out is CSEnexus.com, and that CSE is for Community Supported Enlightenment, nexus.com. Come to the site. We'll have the links there correctly for you so you can follow up on all that we're speaking about. Right now, Pamela, I wanted to get back to prostate, near and dear to my own heart, because approaching 71 in just a month, my prostate does not function in the great way that it used to. But even more importantly to me is my friend Damien, who has been a long-time supporter. He was on the board for Northern Spirit Radio. He's less than a decade older than I am. He died recently, but the deep problems really started when he had prostate cancer. The treatment that they gave him, he had a lot of problems with it. The dementia that followed and so on, all of these things that happened. And so he just died about a month ago. My heart is still heavy with loss of him. He was part of the weekly men's group called Clearwater Men's Council for more than 30 years and a dear person in all. So prostate for him, it ended up, I think, taking his life, even though the medical treatment that he got stopped the cancer theoretically, but it hurt the rest of him. So please tell me what you know about prostate. I don't think women have prostates.
No, we don't. It's a massive, massive framework to look at because 1 in 7 men in this country are going to have some kind of prostate difficulty. Most people know that above 70 years old, that is the big risk group. But when it comes to Black men, it's 40 years and up. And that has to do with all kinds of reasons, which we could get into. Prostate cancer is the second leading cancer for a men's death. The first is lung cancer. So it is definitely ubiquitous. Just to punctuate that sentence a little bit more, 73% of Black men diagnosed with cancer are going to die at a 120% higher rate than the larger population. In the Black community, it's an epidemic, but for men generally, the stats are not good. The faster you get it, the easier time you're going to have of it. The survival rate is excellent if you get it very early on. To that point, there are 33 million survivors of prostate cancer in the U.S. as of 2024. So it's a question of how fast you get it, the kind of treatment that you have at the hands of medical professionals also, especially for Black men, is extremely important. What we have been doing is we brought together a core group. And as I mentioned, we start with a very specific economically distressed group of people who are the most vulnerable, which is why I keep mentioning the statistics, which are horrendous for men of color. And then we enlarge the field, the scope of the work to address everyone. And that's kind of where we are at this point. What we have done, we invited people who are experts in the field, Dr. Otis Brawley, who is the head of the oncology department and a professor at Johns Hopkins University, also from 2008 to 2017 or 18, headed up the American Cancer Institute, etc. Otis Brawley, expert in prostate cancer. This is an African-American gentleman, also schooled in health disparities. He's doing quarterly webinars for us. And when I say us, well, Singularity Botanicals has brought together a core group of Black men who represent tens of thousands of Black men in the United States. That core group consists of men who are involved in a network called the Prince Hall Masons. The Prince Hall Masons are the Black version of the Masons. And there are thousands and thousands of Masons who are completely devoted to a spiritual path of self-transformation, as are the Masons, and also of service. So one of the men who are on our core group is a gentleman who is for Pennsylvania, the point person for their entire medical program. He is one of our core group members. We have someone representing HBCUs, historical Black colleges and universities. We have a gentleman who's representing labor unions and is networked in concentric rings of union workers, specifically in Black communities throughout the country. We have a gentleman who represents Black clergy and networks of Black clergy that are also networked for our prostate cancer risk reduction purposes. And we also have a gentleman he was the former chief U.S. probation person living in Delaware. So he's networked in that particular arena as well. And these networks of men typically do not speak to each other. They do spectacular work in their own network. But as we all know in the work, sometimes activism we do and the service work we do, we get siloed. So this core group of people connects all of these men together for conversations that then ripple out into their individual networks representing thousands of men. So when we bring in Dr. Brawley or an expert to talk about what's happening with prostate cancer research, he's bringing cutting edge research. He's bringing in his own experience over a career that spans decades in terms of health disparities. Also, because he is Johns Hopkins and because he was the American Cancer Institute point person, he's also speaking to a larger network of men generally. And what he does in these webinars that we bring together, he's talking to men about the information they don't get typically from the big prostate cancer prevention or the screening organizations, etc., that do all of the typical AMA institutional medical system kind of work. He's actually written a book that pulls back the curtain on how healthcare completely damages men's prostate cancer journey. I'll give you an example, a quick story about how the medical system views men who dutifully attend prostate cancer screenings and do what they're supposed to do. The story he tells is about a conversation he had with a medical marketing person. Because Dr. Brawley walks on water in the medical community, this medical marketing person that he happened to be sitting next to at this particular medical event gave him the true scoop. And he includes that in his book. And the book is called The Harm We Do. I can get you the exact name of that. But because he is so credentialed, because he's headed up major cancer prevention and cancer research organizations, he was able to then step out without people being able to shoot him down. They couldn't stop him from telling the truth. So this is one of the stories he tells in his book. This marketing rep proudly recounted that out of any 1,000 men 50 years and older at a free mall prostate cancer screening or a free health fair kind of situation, the medical rep had built his business model on the fact that he knew out of that 1,000 men, 145 will have an abnormal screen. 10 of that 145 won't have insurance, so the medical system won't touch them. But the remaining 135 will go ahead and investigate their abnormal screen. 45 of those 135 that will investigate from the mall or health fair screening will actually test positive, will have a diagnosis for cancer. The cost to the medical system, of course, of the free screening is made up in the evaluation that they will be charged for, that their insurance company will be charged for. That medical marketer could accurately calculate the number of men who would have radical surgery, a prostatectomy, how many would get radiation therapy, how many would get hormonal treatment, how many would have incontinence so badly that they'd opt to have an artificial sphincter implanted. He knew exactly how many men would experience erectile dysfunction and want Viagra or Cialis. And he would know how many men, what percentage of those men who took Viagra, Cialis, all the ED medications for whom it wouldn't work and it would not work, and how many would have penile prostheses. So basically, at every stage of the prostate cancer intervention, from screening to treatment to effects of the treatment that were deleterious to the physical functioning of men afterwards, he had a dollar figure that he could share that the medical industry was making on these men. And then he went, that's not even considering the drugs and a whole slew of medical devices that cascade from that one health fair and mall-type screenings. Men thinking they're doing the right thing, thinking they're doing what they're supposed to do for their health. But there's a long chain of all kinds of businesses that benefit from men not knowing the full truth. And a 15-minute in and out with the physician, or the physician's assistant, or the nurse practitioner, not even the physician themselves. So these business plans are developed down to the actual dollar of how much overtreatment or not giving men the full amount of information or pushing them into treatments that don't necessarily really correspond to exactly the very specific situation for them, because they really haven't taken the time to do what a naturopath or a complementary alternative medicine person would do to truly find out the full life circumstances impinging on this person's condition. They don't have the time to do that. The system doesn't allow them to do that, but they know exactly how much money they can make by maximizing the prostate cancer treatment journey. So this is a kind of information our complementary alternative or complementary integrative medicine wraparound services can offer to men. It's complementary. It's not like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So this complements what the conventional treatment for men who are going through this journey, what it could look like if they had everything they really need to feel better about themselves physically, to feel better about themselves psychologically and emotionally, to have less pain. We have on board a licensed massage therapist, an acupressure person, an acupuncture person who's also an MD, a licensed nutritionist, a clinical herbalist, a hypnotherapist. I mean, we have a full team of complementary alternative services that, again, we initially were offering this to Black men who are at higher risk from age 40 on. We're offering this to elders. That's a big nutshell.
As you went through that, Pamela, you mentioned that people don't have the truth, the full truth. And I think it's some aspects of that our listeners for Northern Spirit Radio will benefit from. To be spirit in action, we need to know what portion of the truth is missing. What is it that they need to know?
Overtreatment. I have the last webinar that I can actually send to people with Dr. Brawley. There are certain types of prostate cancer that need vigorous monitoring, that need constant attention to diet, to stress levels, etc., that men can live with without invasive prostatectomies, without invasive hormonal treatment, which basically is a chemical castration. There are types of prostate cancer, and I can also put in your show notes the slides from that presentation that talk about all the different types of prostate cancer, that basically, if the services are there, if the physicians had the time, that literally men can live and die and have a beautiful life and not have any of these invasive treatments. But men are very often too scared, don't have the information, or haven't spoken to someone to know how they can do that and keep things small and manageable. It used to be go in and get it out immediately. That was immediate response. What we have done here is laid out a pathway whereby you don't have to destroy what you know your life to have been before, which benefits the medical profession to go in and do those types of things when you may not necessarily need it.
In the course of this, Singularity Botanicals herbalist and wellness counselor, Pamela Boyce Sims herself, has a role too for some cases. Is that true?
What our team does, as I mentioned, depending on where and how the client and the physicians that work with us, the patients present. If they present with lots of comorbidities that predispose them to prostate cancer, high risk, smoking, type 2 diabetes, blood pressure, circulatory issues, etc., the licensed clinical nutritionist will be our team member who sees that person first to get that diet, the blood pressure in order, to get a lifestyle so that risk doesn't boil over into prostate diagnosis. But from there, if there is pain, if there are sleep issues, if there is anxiety, then we have a licensed therapist who's well-versed in trauma and depression and anxiety. That person would come in. So whoever's presenting, if they have comorbidities, or if they've just been diagnosed and are freaking out, or if they're in mid-treatment and are in serious pain as a function of these invasive methods, we have our hypnotherapist, we have a massage therapist, we have an acupuncturist, we have an acupressure person that can hold the space for them and provide those services. And from there, the next piece is we all come together in providing a pathway toward a lifetime that is like a recovery and resilience that won't put them back on the pathway to reinventing more comorbidities and other unhealthy situations that put them back behind the eight ball health-wise. As an herbalist, I would come in pain management. I would come in with regard to preventing the comorbidities. I have a whole spectrum of herbs that deal with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and circulatory system issues, etc. I deal with the comorbidities. I can deal with pain. So the physiological things, the clinical herbalist, me, the licensed nutritionist, we come in and we can do this via Zoom, but other folks that represent other modalities then fold in as they move further into the process or depending on what presents. So it's not just me, it's a team of folks, and it depends on what's presenting, who they go to first, and how the services and in what order the services wrap around until they're getting a whole holistic team of people supporting them through the process. So men, for example, who really only need to be monitored, if they're that 45% of the people that came from the health fair, that came from that 135 out of the 1,000, if they need to be closely monitored and people to hold their hands, reduce the anxiety, deal with any depression so that they are okay, closely monitoring with their physician because they've got someone talking with them, providing them services. They don't immediately jump into the most radical thing that can literally alter their lives forever. Their lives are completely different from the life they knew before. We can also provide that comfort, pain relief, psychological counseling, and if you really want to go deep, hypnotherapy, etc., that can help them through the journey and avoid a lot of incredibly invasive stuff. And their doctors are there too. We're not kicking the baby out with the bathwater. It's complementary. So yeah, that's it.
Wow, that's a lot of information. One of the things that I heard along in my life path was that I think for women frequently focus on the fact that you get breast cancer. For men, prostate cancer is the big one to worry about. I mean, lung cancer and all that are not to be neglected. But one thing that I had heard was that if men lived long enough, all of them would have prostate cancer eventually, that it's really that endemic with the XY chromosome. I don't know. The numbers you said didn't indicate it was quite that high, but it's just as we get older that this becomes a bigger and bigger thing. Our prostates expand in size for the most part, but there are herbal ways of reducing that, right?
Unequivocally, Mark. Yes. And there is prostate cancer, and then there are other prostate conditions that have to do with enlargement that don't necessarily have to become a cancer diagnosis. It's very, and in these panels that I will link to panels that actually describe, it depends on where it shows up, how fast the cells are dividing. There are lots of nuances in the way it can be treated, stopped in its tracks. Risk can be reduced as men get older, and enlargement that doesn't necessarily have to become cancer can be dealt with. It is extremely nuanced, but no one, well, I shouldn't say no one. Very rarely do people take the time to break it down to folks because they're so intent about getting all of these medical devices and treatments and all of these folks that make a heck of a lot of money on the big ticket items. Nobody's really explaining the full spectrum of possibility. But yes, that information that you did get is right. Most men will have some kind of prostate challenge as they age, but it doesn't necessarily have to be catastrophic. It doesn't necessarily have to be cancerous.
Now, I'm talking to you. You're near Swarthmore in Pennsylvania. I'm over in Wisconsin. A lot of our listeners at the 35 or so stations that carry our programs across the U.S., they're distributed anywhere. Should they be contacting you too? You said you can do some things via Zoom, but a number of people of the integrative and complementary team are local on site.
Right. The only person that really absolutely cannot be anything other than local is the acupuncture person. There is something called needleless acupuncture and acupressure. Anybody that knows energy healing knows that we work with the meridians in the body and the energy. A chiropractor, an acupuncturist, an acupressure person, a Reiki person, all of the energy healing. And as we get deeper into this intense energy shift globally, in medicine that is energy healing is going to take off. And we're going to know so much more about the energy flows within the body. All of us work with subtle energies, whether it's acupuncture, chiropractor, acupressure, etc. We can teach people to do self-manipulation of acupressure points via Zoom. This was massive during COVID. And the techniques of how to actually convey this to people, even self-massage in the Ayurvedic community, a naturopath or an herbalist worth their salt also knows about Ayurvedic medicine as well, in addition to complementary alternative medicine that is based here in the U.S. And we all work with the healing flows in the body and can teach people how to do self-massage, acupressure work, tapping work to get the energy flowing through the meridians. There is so much, with the exception of acupuncture, where you actually have to put the needles in. We can do so much over Zoom. And of course, the hypnotherapist, the psychotherapist, myself as an herbalist, the clinical nutritionist, all of this can be done via Zoom. So only the people in Pennsylvania can get the acupuncturist, but everybody else is available to morph our services online.
I'm going to provide those links on northernspiritradio.org with this interview with Pamela Boyce Sims. Again, I'm speaking to you. You're at the offices for the Being Love Herbal Wellness Center. I took your video tour.
Okay.
I saw everything all along the way. And one thing I had a problem with there was a video that panned past an award that you received, but I couldn't make out the date on it. It was the National Sojourner Truth Meritorious Service Award from the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Clubs, Inc., but I couldn't see when the award was from.
I'll have to get you the actual date, but it was 3 or 4 years ago, because actually after I got that award, I actually joined that club. That is a national Black women's association that has chapters all over the country. And the Chester Club, which is that distressed community that I was talking about, got wind of what I was doing because I was distributing medicinal herbs right in Chester. And they gave me an award, gave Singularity Botanicals, as Woodstock Time Bank is the actual name of the nonprofit that does business as Singularity Botanicals. It's a nonprofit 501c3 organization. They gave Singularity Botanicals that award. It was right after the pandemic, so maybe it's even more than 3 or 4 years. I'll get you the exact date. And then after getting that award, a year later, I joined that club. So as part of the local Black women's service organization as well. So that particular is near and dear to my heart. Yeah.
I'm not sure enough people really understand the importance of Sojourner Truth. I mean, she's such an amazing person the transformation. And so that it's the Sojourner Truth Meritorious Service Award, that would make anyone proud knowing the history.
Indeed. Well, people in Kingston, New York definitely know Sojourner Truth. I remember when I was in New York yearly meeting, Hudson monthly meeting, and I went to serve jury duty in Kingston, New York. But they do a talk for the prospective jurors, and they do a deep dive into the impact of Sojourner Truth in upstate New York, in Kingston. So upstate New York knows Sojourner Truth.
Well, more of us should. She's really one of the wonderful people that doesn't get as much visibility as she deserves.
She was a way shower. Everybody knows Harriet Tubman, but fewer people know Sojourner, right?
Right. One other thing that it mentions on your site, he says, while incarcerated, Angela Davis and Erica Huggins of the Black Panther Party took care of themselves with yoga, mindfulness, and meditation practices. And the thing I noticed from that was that women did it and men don't. And when you're talking about prostate and about self-care, men are not a good case. Whenever I have a little cough, my wife will say, maybe you should check with the doctor right away. You should get that looked at. And I say, it's only a flesh wound. Who cares? Because I am a male in our society. And men very frequently mistreat themselves badly. The smoking rates are higher for men, except for Alaskan women. Alaskan Native women have higher smoking rates than Alaskan men, Native men. Hey, I checked this out because I was aware that these factors play into the self-care that leads to many illnesses, lung cancer and prostate cancer amongst them. So when I noticed that they were taking care of themselves, two women, I was just wondering how many men did or didn't.
That particular quote is really, really loaded because they were doing that because they were on the front lines of protests and they had to deal with all of the jailing that Angela Davis had to deal with, et cetera. So that's another thing that we do, and thank you for bringing that up, do in this effort as well. We are offering these complementary integrative medicine team effort, holding the space for people and providing services for movements. We have people that are in the workers' cooperative movements, in social justice movements, in environmental movements, and given the people in the street that we see now at this point in 2025, this team is also offering services for people who very often suffer burnout faster than other people, because they're on the front lines like Angela Davis was, for example. So that, thank you for bringing that up, because that's one thing we're doing. The other thing is that, yes, the reason why the prostate cancer piece was a doorway into men's self-care is because men, period, as you said, Black men in particular, will wait till they're doubled over in pain or something is literally falling off before they go to the doctor. So that's why we put together this core group of men that are known, are distinguished, know the people in their networks, the HBCUs, the unions, the Black Masons. All of these people are names that Black men can trust. Dr. Brawley is someone who is our consultant. This is a guy who has pulled back the curtain on his own profession and can be trusted to tell the truth. A lot of Black men generally think they're getting a short shrift with a medical system given the history of testing and that kind of thing. Here is a Black man who has the guts and the courage to pull back the curtain and say, this is what we need to know. We have to be on the front lines with what's happening energetically on this planet, sociopolitically in our country and around the world. We can't be dying at this rate. So we have pulled together men who actually can speak to other men and say, okay, it's time. We need to do this. We haven't been practicing self-care. If there was ever a time, it is now. And I also want to bring up the fact that we have a whole memory, brain function, and mental health project, which is also boots on the ground, that started as a population of the men who were dealing with anxiety and depression as a function of the prostate cancer diagnosis and what that does to a man's identity. We're extending that to elders generally. And we now, for the past year, have been sending medicinal herbs to people to look at memory, brain function, and mental health to a larger population, a broader population of people. That's the other project as well.
So, folks, what you want to do is track down Pamela Boyce Sims, or more specifically, maybe Singularity Botanicals. The website, singularitybotanicals.net, is one of the sites you want to go to, but the other one is CSEnexus.com, both of them linked on northernspiritradio.org. You'll find some help and some solace and some grace. That's a word. I don't think of grace as a Buddhist word, Pamela, but I think it aptly describes some of what you experience through your spiritual focus and your very practical focus as well.
That is a hope, to hold space for the evolution of human consciousness, to be able to invoke, receive, and then bring into the world today grace, spiritual upliftment for the benefit of the collective, for the whole. And as each one of us evolves spiritually, we are all netted, we are all connected. There's only one indivisible field of light, or one indivisible quantum field. As we work on our own self-care, the evolution of our own consciousness, and we are simultaneously working on the upliftment and evolution of everyone around us. It ripples out because it is all interconnected. So that, for me, is grace.
One last question. As you mentioned, what's happening with medical field and how the treatments are decided and what direction they go, money plays a role. You talked about giving out the herbals to help people with COVID, just giving it out free. Why are you not driven by getting rich?
What does that serve? You get to a certain point in your life, hopefully early, that you realize, why are we here? I spoke before about a pre-birth contract. Given everything that is manifested in your life, what is your sense of your purpose here? I think for most people who have committed themselves to introspection, to discernment, to expanding awareness of who they really are, it boils down to mission and purpose that dwarfs money, dwarfs that kind of focus. The reward spiritually and emotionally and psychologically is powerful. And typically, being able to sustain yourself just kind of comes along with that if you fully commit. And that is a challenge. People dabble. People walk around the circumference of it. People kind of tiptoe into introspective and deep transmutation. They tiptoe around it. They go to a retreat. They read a book. They intellectually understand it. But when you dive into your connection with subtle realms and all that there is, you are held. So you don't have to worry so much about clawing for money. It's about a whole other thing. But it takes that level of commitment to yourself in service to the greater good at a deep level, not an intellectual level, that leads to being held in that way. So money is a moot point.
If only more people would learn that, what you learned starting at age 14 when you got hit on the head by that book.
Yeah, you remember that.
If only people could learn that at the early age and dedicate their lives as powerfully and clearly and nurturingly as you have done, Pamela, this would be such a better world. I'm glad you're a force leading in that direction. And I thank you so much for joining me today for Spirit in Action.
Well, it's my privilege, and you are doing the same work. The ripple effect that this program and you have is massive, Mark.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Again, the links, CSEnexus.com and SingularityBotanicals.net for more work that Pamela is involved in are on my site, northernspiritradio.org. We'll see you next week for Spirit in Action. The theme music for this program is Turning of the World, performed by Sarah Thompson. Check out all things Spirit in Action on northernspiritradio.org. Guests, links, stations, and a place for your feedback, suggestions, and support. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark Helpsmeet, and I hope you find deep roots to support you to grow steadily toward the light. This is Spirit in Action.